Hello friends, welcome to Yaya Spoon. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And thank you.
Some more.
No, gracias.
I asked if you would like more tamales.
Sí.
That's what I thought you said.
Tamale making process in our family, and it began as a tradition, became a source of food during the 1930s, during the Depression for my grandparents. So my grandmother was selling tamales to supplement the income for the family. And as tradition goes, we had tamales every Christmas Eve night. Started with Bartola Barrientos, that was my grandmother. She would prepare to have the family. It would be a family thing. It would be the kids. She had 4 children. My mother here, Julia, my Aunt Esther. This is my grandfather. But the tradition actually went to my mother and my aunt, which followed in my grandmother's traditional footsteps, if you would say.
Hi everybody, I'm here with my mother, Norma, and we are going to be making our pork tamales, our family pork tamales.
Traditional.
So, yeah, our traditional ones. So every family has their version of tamales. So this is our version, and I hope you love it. Very important, we have pork meat here. This is about 11 pounds, a little over 11 pounds. Then we have, of course, some of the spices, so you'll notice that there's not a whole lot that goes into it. I'm curious, this is my first time doing this as well, so she's going to teach all of us today. We'll begin by prepping the meat. Squeeze your limes. You can add a pinch of salt to the juice also. Prep the garlic cloves for grinding. Remove the cloves from the bulb. Remove the skins. And chop the cloves. Now we're going to grind the cumin seeds, which she already added, and chopped garlic with the mortar and pestle. Gradually add the lime juice as you grind to create a paste consistency. It's an option to toast the cumin seeds beforehand to help release the flavor. Stud the meat by piercing it on both sides where the crushed spice paste or sofrito will be tucked in the meat. Now tuck in the crushed spice paste or sofrito. Next, transfer the meat to the large pot. Add water to cover the meat. Cut the onion into ring slices. Add salt, roughly 1 tablespoon. Add pepper, roughly 1 teaspoon. Add the onion to the pot.
So I have 4 sisters, as you can see here. Dad's in the center. This is myself, my sister, right here. And when my mother passed, well, before my mother passed, we knew that every Christmas Eve we would go and help either my grandmother or mom and dad with the tamales. That was a tradition. And so we would all go and spend all of the afternoon preparing for the tamales and all the things that needed to be done. And then at midnight, when the tamales were all done, then we would serve them, and we would have friends and family, but everybody would be there.
Remove the seeds from the chiles ancho and guajillo. It's best to place the seeds in a bag for easy cleanup.
Now's the time to recruit some help de-seeding the chilies. Set aside the empty pods in a separate pot. Then rinse the chilies. Fill the pot with fresh water. A few seeds here and there is fine. Place on the stovetop on medium-high heat to boil. This will allow them to soften and rehydrate. Once the chilies have boiled, softened, and cooled down, it's time to prep them for the blender. Transfer the chilies with the liquid to the blender to puree. Place the puree in a large container. Continue blending in batches until all the chilies are pureed. Next, add the garlic, about 1 cup of garlic cloves, and cumin seeds, about 1/3 cup, to the blender. Puree them together. Then mix the garlic and cumin puree to the chili sauce to flavor it. Notice the dark red color and consistency of the sauce. Add about 1 tablespoon of salt to the sauce and mix it in. Give it a taste test to ensure the flavor is nice and balanced. The delicious aroma is filling the kitchen.
So that is our family tradition, and we are carrying it out. There's some variations sometimes from where my grandmother and my dad and ourselves have taken it down. Some things have improved, some things have stayed the same, but we try to stay consistent with the recipe that we have.
Time to check the pork. It's been cooking for about 2 hours. Add more water at this point if needed. Cover and continue cooking for about another 45 minutes. It can take an average of up to 3 hours. Carefully remove the pork from the pot. You can use tongs or meat claws as shown. We need to allow it to cool so we can chop it up. While it's cooling, fetch a container to place the chopped meat and another container for the fat. We'll be separating the pork fat from the pork meat. We don't want to shred the meat, but rather cut it into small chunks. Mom says if the meat's too stringy or the chunks are too big, it won't stick to the masa right. Here's where you can recruit some help to speed the process along. This is what we want. We're using about 4 bags of corn husks, or hojas. Once opened, we need to soak them. We found that using an empty, large cooler works best for this step. Cover them with hot water and allow them to soak. The soaking will soften the husks and make it easier to apply the masa and avoids any cracking when you fold the tamales. Close the lid and allow them to soak for about 1 to 2 hours. Before we prep the masa, we need to heat up the chili sauce, the pork stock, and lard to add to the masa flour for flavor. Here's some advice from the tamale boss herself.
When you do tamales, you don't want to get all dressed up. You know, it's an all-day thing, so the more comfortable you are, the better it is for everybody. To my parents, Raymond and Julia Rodriguez, this is the same word, later years. And my father was my grandmother's son-in-law, and he loved her cooking. He loved, in my father's family, they did not make tamales. So my dad, this was a whole new experience for my dad. But he loved my grandmother's cooking. Anything my grandmother made, my dad really enjoyed. And after my mother, after so many years, and we're going through this so many years, my mother became, she had an illness that kept her from doing the things that she wanted to do, and she loved cooking. And she had to turn the reins over to my father to make the tamales every year.
This is the masa flour purchased from our local tortilla factory. We have roughly 25 pounds here, already ground and ready for us to add flavor. The 5 ingredients that will go in the masa are chili sauce, lard, also known as manteca, pork stock or broth, baking powder, and salt. So have these items close by. Now it's time to work the masa by first breaking it up. Recruit some help for this process. After breaking up the masa, you'll need to create some holes. This will allow the ingredients we add to soak in faster. Add 2 tablespoons of salt to each batch of masa. Add roughly 3 tablespoons of baking powder. The baking powder works as a leavening agent to help the dough rise a bit and gives a light texture. Add some stock to the masa and begin with 1 cup at a time. Notice the holes are filling up with the liquid. This is what we want. Then add some melted lard or manteca to the masa. Add some chili sauce. Mom says to be generous with it and spread it evenly. Now we work the masa, and I mean work. The hardest part, but so worth it. The key here is to get a light, airy, and creamy consistency. This process takes time and endurance, so recruit that help. While working the masa, you'll need to gradually add some stock in batches. Mom said don't worry about overworking the dough, just monitor the liquids added so that it's not too much. You'll need to add more chili sauce gradually throughout the process. This will give the masa a red hue and flavor. Continue with this process, rinse, repeat basically until you reach the right consistency. To check the consistency, you can do the fingers test where the masa will slowly drip from your fingers when you pull them up. Add more melted lard to the masa and continue working it. Give it a taste test and add salt as needed. Finally, the right consistency. Time now to allow the masa to sit while we prepare the pork filling for the tamales. First, fry up the trimmed pork fat. Think pork cracklings or chicharron, where you'll fry it like bacon. Here's what we're looking for. Then drain and set aside and continue with the next batch, just like this. Now it's time to fry up the pork meat. Add some of the pork stock to the meat. Stir in some flour to thicken the meat a bit. Taste the meat and add salt if needed. Add more pork stock and chili sauce. Add the pork fat to the meat as you go. This gives an amazing flavor and texture. Allow the meat to simmer and thicken. Here's the first batch of meat filling cooling off. Time to spread the masa on the corn husks or hojas. All hands on deck for this step. This is the fun part. When spreading the masa, you have two sides to the corn husk, smooth and bumpy. Spread the masa on the smooth side. Also notice the masa is spread about halfway towards the top. Avoid going higher because the top is where the tamale folds down. Find a husk big enough for your hand. Since they come in various sizes, you may need to tear off the side that's too wide. For some, it's easier and more comfortable to place it on the table to spread, or I personally prefer to have it in my hand. It's just personal preference, folks. You can use the smaller husks by putting them together to make one. This does take some practice. Just pile them up as you go.
And tamale making is not only a traditional thing and a family thing, but I would do it when our kids were younger to get all the kids together, and they all enjoyed visiting with each other, spreading tamales, spreading masa on the tamale leaves, and just catching up with one another and visiting with one another.
For the meat filling, place the meat in a vertical line in the center of the masa. Then fold both sides in and fold the top down and pinch the top opening. You can put two smaller husks together to make it larger. Try to have them roughly around the same size so they cook evenly. As you can tell, we like them meaty. Place upright in the large steam pot. Mom places a coffee cup in the middle because it makes it easier to stack. Be sure to add any extra strips of husks at the bottom of the pot to prevent burning. We'll also add some water before we steam.
Then she would start, at midnight, she would start serving the tamales with either Mexican chocolate, coffee, or why not bring in Christmas Eve with some cheer? And she would have either whiskey or beer. And tradition with my grandmother was when the tamales were in the pot, starting to cook. As soon as they were underway and they were cooking, she would sit down at the table, have 2 shots of whiskey and a couple of slices of lemon, and she would sit there and wait for the tamales to get done. Meantime, she would be enjoying and relaxing having her whiskey. So that is tradition. We want the tamales to come out good. You have to sit down and have your whiskey.
Add water to the pot about halfway to the level of the tamales. Then place the pot on the stovetop and cover. Start on high heat just to boiling, then lower to a simmer for 2 hours, depending on the size of the tamales and how much meat filling. Here we have 2 pots full of tamales cooking, which is going to be approximately 25 to 30 dozen. It's important after 2 hours of cooking that you allow the tamales to cool down before you open the lid, says Mom. Now it's time to unwrap the tamales and enjoy the fruits of our labor. Hot, tender, meaty, and full of tamale flavors, just like pulpo and nanas. The reason we continue on with this tradition. Thanks to the family for pitching in and helping with the tamales this year. Guess what? They're even better the next day.
It's a great source of just staying in touch with one another and knowing on what's going on in your family and yourselves. And that's the Rodriguez and Barrientos tradition.